Stroll down a modern suburban street in the United States, and one feature of the houses immediately jumps out: the garage. This prominent placement of garages on the front of houses is a relatively recent development in the long history of domestic architecture. A century ago, cars were novel luxuries, and garages were tiny sheds tucked discreetly in backyards or alleyways. Front facades were for porches and parlors, not roll-up doors. So how did garages end up replacing front porches? Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's dive into a special episode of This House. This video is brought to you in part by Victorian Society in America. More on them later. Long before automobiles roamed the roads, American households still had vehicles to worry about, namely horse-drawn carriages and the horses themselves. In the 19th century, wealthy families often kept their horses and carriages in a carriage house, a separate outbuilding usually located at the rear of the property. A carriage house was essentially a small barn or stable. It stored the horse-drawn coach, along with hay, tack, and sometimes provided stalls for the horses. Some carriage houses even had living quarters above for the coachman or stable hands. These structures were intentionally set apart from the main house. After all, they were practical, often messy facilities, certainly not part of the formal front facade of a home. In cities, they were typically accessible via rear alleys or side lanes, keeping the sights and smells of livestock away from the polite company at the front door. The front of a house in this era was more likely to boast a broad front porch than a carriage door. The porch was the social hub of the home, a shaded outdoor sitting room where families would interact with neighbors and passers-by. In essence, before cars arrived, houses had people space on the front and vehicle space hidden out back. When the first automobiles hit the scene in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was no dedicated place to keep these new horseless carriages in a typical home. Early car owners improvised by using the very same carriage houses and stables they already had. If you were wealthy enough to afford an automobile around the turn of the century, you likely had an old carriage barn and simply rolled the new motor car right in next to the horse buggy. For a brief time, this solution worked. However, early motorists soon discovered a few drawbacks. If the carriage house still sheltered horses along with autos, one might find their shiny new car imbued with the less than pleasant aroma of the resident mare and her manure. Clearly, a new approach was needed as automobiles gained popularity beyond the elite. By 1903, about 1 in every 6,500 Americans owned automobiles. Most urbanites got around by foot, streetcar, or horse-drawn trolley. But the invention of affordable, mass-produced cars, most famously Henry Ford's Model T introduced in 1908, was about to change everything. As cars became more accessible, middle-class families began buying their first automobiles. With car ownership trickling down from the super rich to the merely prosperous, the question of where to store these vehicles became urgent. The solutions of the horse and carriage era no longer sufficed. You couldn't just tie up a car at a hitching post, and leaving it out on the street was both impractical and unsafe for the delicate early machines. People quickly realized that automobiles needed their own special shelter, just like horses did, but something purpose-built for cars, which were more delicate than horses in some ways. Unlike a patient mare, a car wouldn't wander off if left on the curb, but early autos had their own quirks. They didn't take kindly to rain or cold, and they certainly couldn't feed or repair themselves. Thus, the stage was set for the birth of the residential garage, a new building type that would soon become an integral part of the home. As the 1910s and 1920s rolled in, Americans who owned cars began constructing dedicated private garages, initially almost always detached from the main house and tucked away at the rear of the lot. In essence, these were the direct descendants of carriage houses, little auto barns for the new mechanical horse. Many early garages were downright primitive by today's standards. Often they were simple sheds made of wood or brick, built with the sole purpose of keeping the car dry and out of the weather. They tended to mimic the style of the main house where possible, but function was far more important than form. In fact, early garage builders leaned heavily on the look of horse stables. People half-jokingly referred to their automobiles as horseless carriages, and these garages even often included proper barn doors. Those first makeshift garages worked, but they were not exactly convenient. Unsurprisingly, inventors and builders started tinkering with better garage designs almost immediately. By the early 1920s, some had introduced sliding garage doors as an improvement over outward swinging barn doors. Sliding doors meant you didn't have to clear a path in the snow to open them, but they brought their own issue. You needed a sidewall at least as wide as the door to slide it open, which effectively required the garage to be twice as wide as the door opening. A more compact solution arrived in 1921 when an inventor named C.G. Johnson patented the overhead sectional garage door, which could glide up along tracks and lie flat overhead under the garage ceiling. This brilliant design eliminated the clearance problem. Now you could open the garage door by simply lifting it upward, no extra wall space needed. Johnson didn't stop there. In 1926, he also introduced the first electric garage door opener to spare homeowners the trouble of heaving up a heavy wood door by hand. The basic blueprint of the modern garage was established by the mid-1920s, setting the stage for garages to go from optional sheds to expected parts of a home. Meanwhile, car ownership kept skyrocketing. Government investments in roads like the Federal Road Act of 1916 and the Federal Highway Act of 1921 encouraged driving and made the automobile ever more central to American life. By the 1920s, cars were no longer rare playthings of millionaires. They were fast becoming a middle-class staple. This exploding demand had a profound effect on housing. Real estate agents in the 1920s reported that homebuyers now expected a garage, even if it was a small one, on any house they considered. To supply this need, companies sprang up with ready-made solutions. Firms like Sears, Roebuck & Company, famous for their kit homes, began offering prefabricated or kit garages you could order from a catalog as early as 1908. These were essentially DIY garage packages. All the parts would be delivered for you to assemble a tiny little car shed in your yard. One pioneer even integrated the automobile shelter into the design of the home much earlier than most realize. Famed architect Frank Lloyd Wright anticipated the coming attached garage trend as early as 1910. Wright's landmark Roby House in Chicago not only epitomized modern prairie-style architecture, it also featured a then unheard-of amenity, a 3-car garage attached to the house. At a time when most houses didn't even have one car, Wright designed Roby House with a built-in garage for 3, seamlessly unified under the same roofline as the home. To a passerby in 1910, the concept of entering a grand residence through a garage gate must have been mind-bending. Architectural historians note that this bold feature was so ahead of its time that it was largely ignored back then. It seemed almost trivial or even odd to have a garage attached to a luxury home. The world simply wasn't ready in 1910 for a home built around the car. So when did this idea become popular? Before we find out, a quick word about the sponsor of today's video, Victorian Society in America. Are you captivated by historic architecture? Want to explore, learn, and dive even deeper into the past? With the Victorian Society in America, you'll have the chance to travel to American cities and tour stunning 19th century buildings, pursue learning through internationally acclaimed summer programs in American cities and abroad, including Chicago, Newport, and London to name a few. Additionally, members will enjoy a free subscription to 19th Century, the semi-annual publication packed with articles on art, architecture, preservation awards, and book reviews. Visit the website below in the video description and become part of the Victorian Society in America today. Thank you, Victorian Society in America, for sponsoring this video. Now let's hop back in. The idea of an attached garage wouldn't gain popularity until the post-World War II era, particularly the late 1940s and 1950s. The post-war economic boom meant the average American family in the 1950s could afford a second car for the second wage earner or for household use. Naturally, garages expanded in size to accommodate this. By the 1960s, the typical new American garage was often built for 2 cars side by side, and they grew so much that the garage alone might account for roughly 45% of a house's total square footage. The once humble car shed was turning into a sizable chunk of the home's footprint. Simultaneously, the new suburban developments sprouting up across the country were planned with the automobile in mind from the start. Unlike old city neighborhoods, which had rear service alleys and closely spaced houses, the suburbs featured wide front yards, driveways, and no alleys in many cases. This meant there was no convenient way to put a garage at the back of the lot. You'd have to drive across the lawn to reach it. The easier solution was to place the garage at the front, directly accessible from the street by a short driveway. What had once been a luxury or cutting-edge idea was now taken for granted. A new house came with an attached garage, just as it came with a kitchen or a bathroom. By this time, it became clear that a garage wasn't just for the car, it was a bonus multi-purpose room. People discovered this enclosed space was great for stashing tools, lawnmowers, bicycles, and all the other accumulating stuff of suburban life. During the 1950s, the image of the American dad puttering at a workbench in his garage or tuning up the family Chevy became a cultural icon. In short, the garage had been domesticated and folded into the home's daily rhythms. Importantly, as garages moved to the front of the house and cars took over the streets, front porches began to shrink or disappear. New houses in the 1950s and 60s often featured only token stoops or small porticos in front, just enough to shelter the front door, while family living spaces shifted toward the backyard, now made private and quiet by the buffering garage and a fenced lawn. Children played in back, and barbecues moved to the back patio. The front of the house became a zone for automobiles first and people second. If an attached two-car garage felt like a triumph of convenience in the mid-century, the late 20th century saw that triumph taken to its extreme. As suburban houses grew in square footage and families acquired even more vehicles, 2, 3, even 4 cars, plus boats or trailers in some cases, the garage often ballooned to occupy a larger and larger share of the front facade. Homebuyers wanted bigger garages to hold all their toys, and builders, working with narrow lots in many subdivisions, often placed a triple-bay garage front and center simply because it was the most efficient use of space. Thus was born the phenomenon, and sometimes maligned archetype, of the snout house. A snout house is essentially a home where the garage protrudes forward and dominates the street view, sometimes to the point that the garage door is the defining feature of the front elevation. The living quarters of the house seem almost incidental, recessed like an afterthought behind the forward-jutting garage. This design became especially common in the 1980s and only ramped up as the decades progressed. But all this wasn't without critique. Architects and urban planners pointed out that a streetscape of front-facing double or triple garage doors is monotonous and unfriendly to pedestrians. Where older homes had windows, porches, and front doors addressing the street, these garage-forward homes present blank doors and driveways, creating a less vibrant neighborhood atmosphere. Socially, some argued it promotes isolation. Neighbors might come and go in cars via the garage and never bump into each other face-to-face out front. Some newer communities, influenced by the new urbanism movement in the 2000s, reintroduced rear alleys or required garages to be set back or oriented sideways, bringing back front porches and a more traditional street presence. These planning trends are a kind of backlash to the excesses of the garage-forward suburb. They signal that while Americans love their garages, there's also a recognition that maybe the garage doesn't need to literally be the front and center face of the home. From carriage houses to suburban snout houses, the garage has certainly driven home its importance in American domestic life, and as long as we're driving, it's likely to stay in the driver's seat of home design for years to come. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What do you think about front-facing garages? Let me know down below in the comments section. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Victorian Society in America for sponsoring this video. Check out their link in the video description to find out how you can get involved today. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on This House.